Clifford May is president of the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, a journalist, and named by Britain's Daily Telegraph as one of the 100 most influential conservatives in America. Welcome to the show, sir.
Very good to be with you, Michael.
Do you know the other 99, by the way?
Yeah, I know quite a few of them. I'm not sure I could recite them off the top of my head. We gather for a little drinking ceremonies and things.
Oh, that must be fun. I mean, this is obviously a time of grotesque anniversary, and that is 9/11. We've been fighting a war against the people who committed this act of mass murder on the United States. Is the West winning this war?
Well, I don't think the West can be said to be winning. I think there has been some progress. I don't think the war actually began on 9/11/01. I don't think it's going to end this year either. What concerns me is that we're not, after all this time, understanding either the enemy we're fighting, his beliefs, his goals, or his ideologies, as well as I think we should be. On the plus side, there's probably 24 plots that al-Qaeda has attempted over the past 10 years. That have been foiled. So it's sort of a mixed bag or a fog of war situation, but I don't think this war is ending anytime soon. And however well we've done over the past 10 years, we need to do probably a lot better over the 10 years to come.
You make a very good point here, because I believe in the West we've been extremely civilized in identifying who the enemy is. We have never made these blanket statements about all Islam or all Muslims, in spite of what our accusers will say. But we now have administrations, I would argue, in Washington, perhaps in London, less so in Canada, where we seem frightened of even implying who the enemy might be.
Well, I think that's quite right. In some cases, we have people, and it's not true in Canada, you're quite correct, who are trying to delude themselves about who the enemy is and what the enemy's motives are. Look, the enemy is that we're talking about, and there's more than one, there are multiple enemies, they call themselves jihadis. And I think if that's the word they use, well, maybe we should use it as well. And their definition of jihad is not the only possible definition, but it is not a definition that is outlandish based on doctrine. They believe they are waging a war against the West, war against America, against Israel, against Europe. And they are doing it, they say, to restore the power and glory that Islam enjoyed for 1,000 years, which it lost between about the 17th century, when the decline began, when Islam pushed up into Europe and was stopped at the gates of Vienna in 1683, and the early 20th century, when the caliphate was finally dissolved, and the last caliph left on the Orient Express from Istanbul to Paris. And at that point, the Ottoman Empire was no more, and it became Turkey, the nation of Turkey. They believed 1924, when that happened, was a terrible catastrophe, and they want the future to be very different. They want the future to look like the ancient past.
I find this deeply significant, because a lot of people are unaware that 1924 doesn't mean so much to most people in the West, but this was when the Ottoman Empire ended, the Caliphate went off, and Kemal Ataturk, who was really a very civilized and progressive man in many ways, came to power.
Yes.
We see that, I suppose, those of us who studied, as a great watershed, where we had a more liberal Middle East. But those who are fighting us say this was the great tragedy, and we have to restore what actually occurred before 1924.
Yes, exactly. So Bernard Lewis, you may be familiar, I think he remains, at the age of 95, the greatest expert scholar on the Middle East and Islam, has pointed out that all of us are shaped by history, but Muslims have a keener awareness of that than most of us. And too many of our political leaders are unfamiliar with history and can't even imagine people who take theology very seriously. And so they think our enemies must have specific small grievances, and that if we can just address these grievances and reach out to them and view terrorism as a crime and rather than a type of unconventional warfare, surely we can end up in a state of what the universities call conflict resolution, and all will be well. And that is self-delusion.
Yeah. Barack Obama, peace be upon him, he has made many speeches where he has stated, not implied, but stated that if we bend a bit more, if we're more empathetic, if we understand, then all will be well. That demonstrates to me a fundamental misunderstanding of any theology, whether it's Islamic, Christian, or Orthodox Jewish. Those who are fighting us don't want a couple of changes about the wearing of the hijab. They want a new dominance, not always even a vicious one, but they want to be in charge. And the president making a few nice comments will change nothing at all. In fact, it shows weakness.
I think it does, and I think it's very akin to the sort of Neville Chamberlain view, and it was, of course, a widespread view in UK and in the West in the 1930s, that Herr Hitler had some legitimate grievances over the fate of the ethnic Germans in Czechoslovakia, over the Versailles Treaty, which was very prejudicial against Germany's interests, and that if we would just, you know, appease, just give him some of the things he wants, that will satisfy his appetites. What Churchill understood is that that was not the case. His appetite was only whet by those appeasements, and that the grievances were excuses, but he had ambitions. And our enemies have ambitions. And it's not just al-Qaeda. I need to bring into this conversation Iran. Yeah. I would argue that the Islamist or jihadist war against the West in its modern form began in 1979. I was a young correspondent in Iran at that time. And that was a jihadist revolution, an Islamic revolution. It established the first jihadi state in the modern world. And that was a Persian and Sunni state and Shia state. But there were plenty of radical Sunnis in the Muslim Brotherhood and elsewhere who said, where is our jihadi state? We need to keep up. We need to fight the infidel, just as the Ayatollahs are saying they are doing now in Iran. And what you end up with were rival movements, one based in Iran and one, of course, which became al-Qaeda and the Taliban and many other organizations out there that are fighting against America, Israel, India, blowing things up in all kinds of places around the world, from Mumbai to Bali to Istanbul. Mm.
Clifford May, we must have you back on this show. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so very much indeed.
Anytime. My pleasure, Michael.